Alex Pereira. This guy's cold as ice.
This guy might be the best big game hunter I've ever seen in UFC history.
This guy has this champion aura about him.
Pereira is one of the scariest humans I've ever seen in my life.
Picture this: the roar of the crowd, the clash of titans under blazing lights, and a man standing tall in the center of it all, a predator forged in the fires of two worlds. Welcome to the incredible saga of Alexandre Silva Pereira, born on July 7, 1987, in the heart of Brazil. This isn't just the story of a fighter, it's the tale of a legend who conquered not one, but two combat kingdoms, mixed martial arts, and kickboxing, leaving a trail of broken opponents and shattered records in his wake. Fast forward to today, March 2025, and Pereira's name echoes through the UFC like a thunderclap. He's the reigning UFC Light Heavyweight Champion, a title he wears like a crown atop his chiseled frame. But that's not all. He's also a former UFC Middleweight Champion, making him the 9th fighter in UFC history to claim gold in 2 weight divisions. And here's the kicker: he's the first to rule both middleweight and light heavyweight in the octagon. As of November 19, 2024, this unstoppable force sits at number 3 in the UFC men's pound-for-pound rankings, a testament to his relentless dominance. But let's rewind the tape, because Pereira's journey didn't start in the UFC spotlight. Before he was dropping jaws in the octagon, he was a kickboxing phenom, a destroyer of worlds in the ring. Picture him stepping into the Glory Kickboxing arena, where he didn't just win titles, he redefined what it meant to be a champion. He claimed the Glory middleweight belt, then stormed up to light heavyweight and took that crown too. Here's the mind blower: he's the first and only fighter to hold Glory titles in 2 weight classes at the same time. Back in February 2021, the kickboxing world bowed to him, ranking him number 1 in both middleweight and light heavyweight divisions. This wasn't just skill, this was history in the making. Pereira's path wasn't a straight line to glory, though. He cut his teeth in the gritty proving grounds of It's Showtime and Super Combat Fighting Championship, trading blows with the best in kickboxing. Then, when he turned his sights to MMA, he tore through promotions like Jungle Fight and Legacy Fighting Alliance, building a resume that reads like a highlight reel. By the time he stepped into the UFC, he wasn't just a fighter, he was a force of nature. So what makes Alex Pereira special? It's simple. He's the only known warrior to become a 2-division world champion in both MMA and kickboxing. That's not just rare, that's the stuff of legend. Fans and fighters alike whisper his name with reverence, dubbing him one of the greatest combat athletes to ever lace up gloves. From the streets of Brazil to the top of the UFC mountain, Pereira's story is a knockout punch of grit, power, and destiny. And trust me, this is one tale you won't want to miss a single second of. Let's step back into the shadows of Alex Pereira's origin story. A tale that starts not in the spotlight of the octagon, but in the gritty, unforgiving streets of a Brazilian favela. Picture a young Alex growing up where survival was the first fight of every day. School? That didn't stick. He dropped out of a middle school, trading textbooks for the back-breaking grind of a bricklayer's assistant. Dust and sweat became his world, but that wasn't the end of the road. Soon, he found himself behind the counter of a tire shop, the smell of rubber and grease clinging to his hands. Life was tough, and the kid from the favela was just trying to keep his head above water. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Surrounded by the rough-and-tumble crew at work, Pereira fell into a trap that's snared too many: the bottle. Influenced by his colleagues, he started drinking hard. What began as a way to fit in spiraled into a full-blown battle with alcoholism. The man who'd one day dominate champions was losing a fight against himself, drowning in a haze of addiction. By 2009, he'd hit rock bottom, but something inside him, call it grit, call it destiny, refused to tap out. That's when the twist comes. In a move that would change everything, Pereira laced up a pair of gloves and stepped into a kickboxing gym. This wasn't about fame or titles, not yet. This was raw, desperate survival. He wasn't just training to throw punches, he was fighting to claw his way out of the abyss, to kick the addiction that had him in a chokehold. Every jab, every kick, every bead of sweat was a rebellion against the life trying to drag him down. The favela kid wasn't just building muscle, he was rebuilding his soul. And from that fire, a legend was born. Let's rewind the clock to a chapter most fans don't talk about enough. The raw, untamed beginnings of Alex Pereira's combat journey long before he was a kickboxing king or an MMA destroyer. We're talking about his amateur boxing days in Brazil, where the favela kid first stepped into the squared circle and started dropping bombs. This wasn't the polished Pereira we know today. This was a hungry, unpolished force of nature, scrapping his way through 28 amateur boxing matches. His record? A jaw-dropping 25 wins all by knockout with just 3 losses. Yeah, you heard that right. 25 times. He didn't just win, he ended it, leaving opponents crumpled on the canvas. Even back then, Pereira's power was something special, a signature that'd follow him to the top. That devastating left hook? It was born in those gritty amateur rings. Viral clips from those days tell the story better than words. Pereira unloading thunderous shots, knocking guys clean out, including one insane moment where he sent an opponent flying out of the ring. This wasn't just boxing, this was a demolition clinic. And the combat world was starting to take notice. Word of his exploits spread fast, catching the eye of big names. Ryan Garcia, yeah, that Ryan Garcia couldn't help but sing Pereira's praises, floored by his ability to finish fights in a sport where knockouts are tough to come by, especially in the amateur ranks with those big gloves. Garcia even threw out the idea of training together, a nod to just how terrifying Pereira's hands were. And he wasn't alone. Elite boxers across the game started tipping their hats, marveling at this Brazilian beast who seemed to carry dynamite in his fists. It was clear Pereira wasn't just a boxer or a kickboxer or an MMA fighter. He was a versatile, bone-crushing phenom, laying the groundwork for a legacy that'd shake every corner of combat sports. Step into the wild ride of Alex Pereira's rise saga of blood, sweat, and glory that kicked off in 2012. That year, the Brazilian juggernaut stormed onto the scene, snatching the Jungle Fight middleweight title and the WGP 85 Kilos 187 LB Championship like a man possessed. But he wasn't done testing his mettle. He threw down the gauntlet for the ITS Showtime 85 Max Championship against Jason Wilness. It was a brutal war, but Wilness caught him with a TKO in the second round, handing Pereira a rare taste of defeat. Undeterred, 2013 rolled in and Pereira came roaring back. He claimed the Waco Pro Pan American K1 85 Kilo 187 LB Championship, proving his fists were still lethal. Later that year, he dipped back into the amateur ranks for the WACO World Championship 13 at 91 kilos. Picture this. He crushed his way through the quarterfinals and semifinals, only to face Sergey Maslobojev in the final showdown. It was a razor-close battle, but Maslobojev edged him out, leaving Pereira with a hard-earned silver medal. Just 2 months later, he was back in the WGP tournament, flattening Camilo Ferraz in the semifinals before squaring off with Cesar Almeida in the finals. These two had history. Pereira had already beaten Almeida in Super Combat New Heroes 2. But this time, Almeida flipped the script, taking the win by decision and leveling their rivalry at 1-1. By 2014, Pereira was ready to make waves on the global stage. He debuted in Glory at Glory 14, Zagreb, entering the middleweight contender tournament in Croatia on March 8th. First up, Dustin Jacoby, who got obliterated by a first-round knockout. Then came Sahak Parparian, and the final Pereira outworked him, clinching the tournament with a majority decision. The world was starting to see what he was made of. That buzz carried him to Glory 17, Los Angeles, where he joined the last man standing middleweight tournament in Inglewood on June 21st. 8 fighters, 1 crown, but it wasn't his night. He clashed with eventual champ Artem Levin in the quarterfinals and fell by unanimous decision, exiting early. The fire still burned, though. Later in 2014, Pereira locked horns with Cesar Almeida again, this time at WGP Kickboxing 25 for the vacant WGP Middleweight Championship. 3rd time's the charm. He outpointed Almeida by decision, settling the trilogy. He didn't stop there, defending his WGP title at WGP KB40. He smashed Macon Silva with a 2nd-round KO that echoed through the arena. What came next was a blistering 4-1 run over 5 fights. The only man to stop him? The pound-for-pound maestro Artur Kishenko. But this streak wasn't about losses. It was about legends in the making. Pereira notched the victories that would define him. 2 epic wins over a future UFC middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya. First, he outclassed Adesanya by unanimous decision, then delivered a thunderous counter left hook KO that left the world stunned. Those fights weren't just wins, they were statements. Pereira wasn't done with glory either. He entered the Glory Contender Tournament, bulldozing Buram Rama in the semifinals. But in the finale at Glory 40, Yusri Belgaroui stood in his way and took the victory, halting Pereira's charge. Win or lose, though, one thing was clear. Alex Pereira was a force of nature, carving his name into combat sports history with every earth-shaking strike. Let's dive into the golden era of Alex Pereira's Reina chapter, where he didn't just fight for titles, he built an empire in the glory ring. It all kicked off at Glory 46 China, where Pereira faced the seasoned Simon Marcus. This wasn't a brawl, it was a masterclass. Pereira dismantled Marcus over 5 rounds, walking away with a unanimous decision and the Glory Middleweight Championship strapped around his waist. The king had arrived, but crowns aren't kept without blood. Pereira's first defense came against Yusri Belgaroui at Glory 49 Superfight Series, a rematch dripping with tension. He held the line, outstriking Belgaroui to keep his throne. Then in 2018, the stakes soared higher. Madison Square Garden, New York, Glory 55. The stage was set for another clash with Belgaroui. This time, Pereira didn't mess around. At 2:29 of round 1, he unleashed a monstrous overhand right, dropping Belgaroui like a sack of bricks. Knockout. For Pereira, it was his 28th career win, his 6th in Glory, and a deafening message to the division. This belt wasn't going anywhere. By November 2018, whispers started swirling. Pereira hinted he'd chase MMA after his Glory contract expired in April 2019. But the story twisted again. He re-signed with Glory, securing a deal that let him dip his toes into mixed martial arts while still ruling the kickboxing world. And rule he did. 4 title defenses followed. A murderer's row of challengers. Belgaroui twice, Simon Marcus, and Jason Wilness. Each time, Pereira stood tall, his reign unbreakable. Then came the pivot that shook the sport. At Glory 68, Pereira stepped up to face Donegi Abina for the interim Glory Light Heavyweight Championship. The ring trembled as he landed a 3rd-round knockout that didn't just win him the belt, it made history. Pereira became the first double champion in Glory, holding both middleweight and light heavyweight gold. A predator in 2 divisions untouchable. He wasn't ready to slow down. On December 21st, 2019, at Glory Collision 2, Pereira chose to defend his middleweight title against Ertugrul Bayrak. Round 1 was a clinic Pereira dominated, battering Bayrak from pillar to post. Then, right at the bell, he sealed it with a knockout that left the crowd roaring and Bayrak staring at the lights. The light heavyweight crown was next in his sights. At Glory 77, Pereira challenged the formidable Artem Bakatov for the full Glory Light Heavyweight Championship. It was a war, razor thin, but when the dust settled, Pereira took it by split decision. History screamed his name. He was the first fighter in Glory to hold 2 belts simultaneously, a double champ reigning supreme. But Glory's a fickle beast. Later, Pereira was stripped of his middleweight title, forced to focus on one kingdom. His first light heavyweight title defense came at Glory 78. Rotterdam a rematch with Vakitov. The tension was electric, the fight a brutal chess match. Pereira lost by majority decision, but controversy erupted. In round 4, the ref docked him a point for repeated clinching a call that had fans and fighters alike crying foul. Vakitov walked away with the belt, but Pereira's fire? That didn't dim one bit. Now, let's pivot to a seismic shift in Alex Pereira's saga, his leap from the kickboxing throne into the wild, chaotic world of mixed martial arts. It's 2015, and Pereira's ready to trade the ring for the cage. His pro MMA debut hits at Jungle Fight 82, squaring off against Camille Ottoni. This wasn't a gentle welcome. The Brazilian submission ace locked him up and tapped him out, handing Pereira a bitter first loss. But if you think that broke him, think again. Pereira dusted himself off and roared back in Jungle Fight, stacking 2 straight wins like a man on a mission. First, Marcelo Cruz ate a vicious KO. Then, Marcus Vinicius Silveira got smashed by a TKO. The kickboxing king was finding his footing, and the cage was starting to feel the heat. By 2018, Pereira's stock was rising fast. He dropped a bombshell. He'd signed up to fight Diego Henrique da Silva on the Brazilian edition of Dana White's Contender Series, set for August 10th. This was his shot at the big leagues, a chance to catch the UFC's eye. But fate had other plans. Glory, his kickboxing home, slammed the door shut, refusing to let their champ step into MMA just yet. The bout evaporated, and Pereira's MMA dreams hit pause. Fast forward to October 22nd, 2020. News breaks that Pereira's inked a deal with Legacy Fighting Alliance, and the hype train's back on track. November 20 rolls around, and he makes his LFA debut against Thomas Powell. Picture this: Pereira, the knockout artist, stepping into the cage with that predator's glare. Round 1 barely gets going before he unleashes Hell Powell's out cold, flattened by a first-round knockout. The message was clear. Alex Pereira wasn't just dipping his toes in MMA, he was here to dominate. And the world was about to find out what those hands could do in a whole new game. September 3rd, 2021, the combat world buzzed as Alex Pereira, the kickboxing titan, inked a deal with the UFC. The Octagon was about to meet its newest predator. His debut came fast and furious at UFC 268 on November 6, 2021, against Andreas Michailidis. Picture the scene: Pereira stalking his prey, then boom, round 2 erupts with a technical knockout that left Michailidis sprawled on the canvas. The crowd lost it, and the UFC brass took notice, slapping a performance of the night bonus on his first fight. The legend was officially in the house. Next up, March 12, 2022, UFC Fight Night 203 Pereira squared off with Bruno Silva, a gritty Brazilian brawler. This wasn't a quick finish, it was a war. For 3 relentless rounds, Pereira's strikes rained down like artillery, outgunning Silva at every turn. The judges' scorecards didn't lie, unanimous decision, all Pereira. His fists were speaking loud, and the UFC was listening. Then came the big one. Originally slated for UFC 277, on July 30th, 2022, Pereira was booked to face Sean Strickland, a knockout artist in his own right. But the UFC couldn't wait, bumping the clash to UFC 276 on July 2nd. The hype was unreal, and Pereira delivered beyond imagination. Round 1, the air crackled, then lightning struck. A picture-perfect combo detonated on Strickland's chin, dropping him cold. Knockout. The arena exploded, and Pereira walked away with another Performance of the Night award in his pocket. But that wasn't all. The fans voted him 3rd place in the Crypto.com Fan Bonus of the Night, pocketing $10,000 in Bitcoin. From kickboxing royalty to UFC stardom, Alex Pereira wasn't just winning. He was rewriting the game, one earth-shaking punch at a time. Let's crank the dial to November 12, 2022 UFC 281, Madison Square Garden, the mecca of combat sports. The air is electric, buzzing with anticipation, because Alex Pereira is stepping into the octagon for the UFC Middleweight Championship. His opponent? Israel Adesanya, the slick, untouchable champ who'd ruled the division with swagger and precision. These two weren't strangers. Pereira had already beaten Adesanya twice in their kickboxing days, once by decision, once by a brutal left hook KO. The bad blood was thick, the stakes sky high. This was personal. Adesanya came out sharp, dancing around Pereira's power, landing stinging counters. The crowd was on its feet, split between chants for the champ and roars for the challenger. 4 rounds of chess and carnage unfolded, Adesanya's speed clashing with Pereira's relentless pressure. Then, round 5 hit like a thunderstorm. Pereira cornered Adesanya, unloading a barrage of strikes hooks, uppercuts, pure venom. The ref jumped in as Adesanya slumped against the cage. A technical knockout at last. The garden erupted, Pereira's fists raised in triumph as he snatched the middleweight crown. The UFC couldn't ignore it. Another Performance of the Night award landed in his lap. His third in 4 fights. The kickboxer had conquered MMA's elite, flipping the script on a rivalry that had haunted Adesanya for years. But legends don't rest, and rivalries don't die easy. April 8, 2023, UFC 287 in Miami, the rematch was on. Adesanya wanted his belt back, and the buildup was pure fire. Trash talk flew at press conferences. Adesanya vowed revenge, pointing to Pereira's kickboxing wins as old news. Fans packed the arena, split down the middle, banners waving, tension so thick you could cut it. Round 1 was a feeling out process. Adesanya probing, Pereira stalking. Then round 2 exploded. Adesanya found his rhythm, cracking Pereira with leg kicks and jabs, baiting him into a firefight. The clock ticked down to the final minute, and the champ smelled blood. A blistering right hand snapped Pereira's head back. Then a vicious hook followed. Boom! Pereira crashed to the mat, knocked out cold with seconds to spare. The crowd lost its mind. Adesanya leaping onto the cage, screaming in victory as he reclaimed his throne. For Pereira, it was his first UFC loss, a gut punch after his meteoric rise. No bonus this time, just the sting of defeat and a rivalry now knotted tighter than ever. Whispers started swirling. Adesanya had exorcised his demons, but everyone knew this war was far from over. 2 titans, 1 belt, and a story that's still writing itself classic UFC drama at its finest. Let's talk about the beast that Alex Pereira was becoming. In the UFC, a man whose frame was starting to look like it didn't belong in the middleweight division. This guy was a nightmare on the scale, cutting massive weight like it was nothing. Word around the gym? On fight night as a middleweight, after dehydrating to hit that 185-pound limit at weigh-ins, Pereira ballooned back up to a hefty 215 pounds. Compare that to his old nemesis Israel Adesanya, who tipped the scales at 196 pounds on fight night, a nearly 20-pound gap. Even when he stepped up to light heavyweight later, Pereira was still walking around at 225 to 235 pounds, a walking tank with dynamite in his fists. Fans and analysts couldn't stop buzzing. This wasn't just skill, this was a physical anomaly ready to shake up a new division. Then, on April 13th, 2023, the bombshell dropped. Pereira hit Twitter with a simple announcement that sent shockwaves through the MMA world. He was moving up to light heavyweight, fresh off his knockout loss to Adesanya at UFC 287. The whispers started. Some said it was the weight cut wearing him down. Others figured he wanted bigger prey. Either way, the middleweight champ was done squeezing into 185. The 205-pound jungle was calling. Fast forward to July 29, 2023, UFC 291 in Salt Lake City. Pereira's light heavyweight debut was no soft landing. He drew former champ Jan Blachowicz, a Polish powerhouse with a granite chin and a wrestler's grit. The buildup was insane. Blachowicz smirked at pressers, promising to welcome Pereira with a ground-and-pound lesson, while Pereira's icy stare said he'd bring the same knockout magic that felled middleweights. Fight night hit, and the Delta Center was electric fans chanting, lights blazing. Round 1 was a chess match. Blachowicz tested Pereira's takedown defense, dragging him to the mat, but Pereira popped up unfazed. Round 2, the striking opened up. Pereira's left hook whizzed past Blachowicz' guard, while Jan fired back with heavy counters. Round 3 was pure chaos, a back-and-forth slugfest that had the crowd roaring. When the final bell rang, it was too close to call until the judges spoke. Split decision, and Pereira's hand went up. The stats backed it. 22 out of 26 media outlets scored it for him. A razor-thin victory that proved he belonged. No bonus this time, but the message was loud. Pereira wasn't just surviving at 205, he was hunting for the throne. All right, strap in, fight fans. Let's talk about a dude who doesn't just step into the octagon, he storms it like a freaking hurricane. Alex Sandro Silva Pereira, born July 7, 1987, hailing from Brazil's tough streets, is the kind of savage who's turned UFC into his personal playground. As of March 2025, this guy's the UFC Light Heavyweight Champ, a former Middleweight King, and sitting pretty at number 3 in the pound-for-pound rankings per November 19th, 2024. 2-division champ? Yep, he's the 9th in UFC history to pull it off, and the first to lock down both middleweight and light heavyweight belts. First up, November 11, 2023. UFC 295, New York's Garden is buzzing, the light heavyweight title's up for grabs, and Pereira's staring down Jiří Procházka, the ex-champ with that wild man energy. Pre-fight? Procházka's doing his mystic warrior thing. Pereira's just smirking like he knows what's coming. Round 1's a slow burn. Then round 2 hits Pereira, unloads a clinic, hammering Procházka till the ref calls it a TKO. Belt's his, crowd's losing it, and he snags a performance of the night bonus. Fast forward to April 13, 2024 UFC 300, the big show. Pereira's defending against Jamahal Hill, another former champ talking big, saying he'll expose Pereira's weak chin. Round 1, Hill clips him low. Pereira shrugs it off like it's nothing. Then wham, a left hook lands flush. Hill's lights go out. Knockout, first round done. Fans are screaming. Pereira's proving he's no fluke. June 29th, 2024, UFC 303 Chaos strikes. McGregor's out, Chandler's sidelined, and Pereira jumps in on 2 weeks' notice for a rematch with Procházka. Late in round 1, he tags Procházka with a left hook, drops him at the buzzer. Round 2, head kick, bam, Procházka's down again, punches finish it. Another $50K performance of the night, plus his coach spills it, a $303K bonus for saving the card. Guy's a machine! October 5th, 2024, UFC 307 third defense, Khalil Roundtree Jr.'s in his face. Roundtree's swinging hard, but Pereira's got ice in his veins. Round 4, he flips the switch technical knockout, snags his first Fight of the Night award. Here's the kicker. 175 days for 3 defenses, smashing Ronda Rousey's 189-day record. And he's the 7th UFC fighter to defend 3 times in a year. Insane. Now, mark your calendars, March 8, 2025, UFC 313. Pereira's got Magomed Ankalaev next, a grappling beast who's been itching for gold. Ankalaev's trash-talking, saying Pereira's just a striker. But Pereira's crew's firing back. He's training to end it quick. This one's got fireworks written all over it. Will Ankalaev wrestle him into next week, or does Pereira's left hook add another scalp? 4th defense, and the hype's unreal. Some call it a trap, others say it's his legacy fight. Either way, it's gonna be a banger. Off the mats, Pereira's a family guy, father to 2 sons from his ex-wife, a personal anchor that keeps the champ grounded amid his whirlwind rise. His nickname, Powhatan, isn't just a cool tag, it's a Tupi phrase meaning stone hands, a nod to those sledgehammer fists that have flattened foes from Glory to the UFC. Credit goes to Balakwa Wera, Pereira's first kickboxing coach, who didn't just spot his power, but helped him uncover his tribal lineage. A game changer that connected Pereira to something bigger than the ring. And he's not the only Pereira throwing hands. Enter Aline Pereira, his younger sister, a rising star in her own right. She's battled it out in Glory's kickboxing ranks and made waves with her MMA debut on November 18, 2022. From the favela to the UFC summit, Alex Pereira's a legend. Punching history with every blow. If you love this story, support the MMA Combat Arena channel, hit subscribe, and drop some likes and comments to keep the fight alive.